Do you want to marry me?
Yes. Relax, everything's going to be fine. Just breathe.
A black woman was rejected by her fiancé and married his Korean Mafia boss father. What happened on the wedding night shocked everyone. Zainab Okoye stood in a wedding dress worth more than her old life, marrying a man who could end lives with a phone call, not because she loved him, but because his coward son had thrown her away like trash. 24 hours ago, she was nobody. Now, she was the most dangerous woman in Seoul, and her ex-fiancé was sitting in the back row, watching his father claim everything he'd been stupid enough to lose. Listen, if you're not subscribed, you're basically siding with Min Jae's family right now. Don't be that person. Hit subscribe to see Zainab become the queen she was always meant to be. Like, if you're ready to watch this whole family learn what happens when you mess with the wrong woman. And comment karma if you know what's about to go down. The thing about being humiliated in front of 20 wealthy Koreans is that they do it so politely, you almost don't realize you're being destroyed until you're driving home with mascara running down your face and your future crumbling in your rearview mirror. Zainab should have seen it coming. Should have noticed the way Min Jae's texts had gotten shorter over the past month, how his I love yous started sounding like auto-responses from a customer service bot. Should have paid attention when he stopped defending her to his mother, when he started saying things like, let's just keep the peace, and you know how traditional families are. But love makes you stupid. Love makes you sit in a penthouse suite at the Grand Josian Hotel, 6 weeks pregnant, watching your fiancé's spine dissolve in real time while his mother conducts your execution with the precision of a symphony conductor. You understand, don't you, dear? Min Jae's Aunt Heejin said, her smile sharp enough to perform surgery. She was wearing Chanel and disappointment, a combination that seemed to be the uniform for this particular firing squad. Min Jae's father has worked so hard to build our family's reputation. We have to think about appearances. Appearances. That was the word they used when they meant, you're black and we'd rather die than have mixed grandchildren. Zainab sat on a cream-colored sofa that probably cost more than her car, surrounded by women who looked like they moisturized with the tears of their enemies. Min Jae's mother, Ji-woo, presided over the gathering like a queen addressing her court. She hadn't looked directly at Zainab once. It was a power move. Acknowledge someone's existence, and you give them value. Ji-woo was making it clear that Zainab had none. Min Jae, Ji-woo said, her voice soft as poison, your father and I have discussed this thoroughly. The family agrees that this relationship is not sustainable. Not sustainable. Like Zainab was a failed business venture. A bad investment. A stock that should have been sold before it tanked. Min Jae sat beside his mother, studying his hands like they were the most fascinating things he'd ever seen. The same hands that had held Zainab's face 2 months ago when he proposed at Namsan Tower. The same hands that had trembled when she told him about the pregnancy, then steadied as he kissed her and promised everything would be okay. Those hands were very still now. Very quiet. Very much not defending her. Min Jae. Zainab's voice came out smaller than she wanted. She hated how desperate she sounded, but desperation was all she had left. Are you going to say something? Anything. He finally looked up. His eyes, those beautiful eyes she'd written poems about in her journal like a lovesick teenager, were empty. Maybe we did move too fast, Zainab. Maybe we need time to think about this. Time to think. As if their 2 years together was a philosophy problem he needed to solve. As if the baby growing inside her was a hypothetical situation they could debate over coffee. Time to think, Zainab repeated slowly. We're getting married in 3 weeks, Min Jae. I'm pregnant. What exactly do you need time to think about? Aunt Heejin made a small sound, like Zainab mentioning the pregnancy out loud was vulgar. As if pretending it didn't exist would make it disappear, like a bad dream or a poor investment choice. Perhaps, Ji-woo said, finally looking at Zainab with eyes that could freeze hell itself, it would be best if you stayed with your own family for a while. In America, we can certainly help with arrangements. Arrangements? They meant an abortion and a plane ticket. They meant making Zainab disappear like she'd never existed, like she was a stain they could pay to remove. Wow, Zainab said, and she started laughing. It was either that or start screaming, and she'd be damned if she gave these women the satisfaction of seeing her break. You're really doing this. You're really sitting here in your designer clothes, in your fancy hotel, asking me to get rid of your grandchild like it's an inconvenient appointment. We're offering you a generous settlement, Ji-woo said coldly. Enough money to start over. Somewhere else. Somewhere more appropriate. And if I say no? The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Ji-woo's smile was winter personified. Then you'll find that life in Seoul can become very difficult for foreign nationals without proper support. It was a threat wrapped in silk, delivered with a smile. These women didn't yell or curse. They simply made you disappear from jobs, from apartments, from existence. They had the power to erase you from Seoul's fabric like you were a typo in their perfect narrative. Zainab looked at Min-jae one last time. Say something. Please. Tell them this is crazy. Tell them we're getting married anyway. Tell them our baby matters. Tell them I matter. Min-jae opened his mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. I'm sorry, Zainab. I really am. But this is for the best. And there it was. The final betrayal. Delivered in the same soft voice he'd used to tell her he loved her. Zainab stood up, smoothing down her dress with hands that only shook a little. You know what's funny? You all keep talking about family honor and reputation and tradition. But you're the most dishonorable people I've ever met. You hide behind culture and propriety, but really, you're just cowards. Every single one of you. She looked at Min-jae, really looked at him, memorizing the face of the man who'd promised her forever and delivered 3 months. I hope she's worth it. She? Min-jae's face went pale. What are you? Oh, did you think I didn't know about the Young family's daughter? About the marriage arrangement your father's been negotiating? Zainab smiled, and it hurt her face. I might be the foreigner you're embarrassed of, but I'm not stupid. I know you've been planning this exit for months. You just needed your family to be the bad guys, so you could play the victim. The silence was deafening. Even Ji-woo looked momentarily impressed by the revelation, though she hid it quickly. Get out, Aunt Hee-jin hissed. Get out now before we call security. Don't worry, Zainab said, walking toward the door with her head high, even though everything inside her was collapsing. I wouldn't want to contaminate your precious bloodline any longer. She made it to the elevator before the tears came. Made it to the lobby before the sobs started. Made it to her tiny apartment in Itaewon, the neighborhood where Seoul kept its foreigners, before she completely fell apart. Her phone buzzed. A text from Min-jae. Asterisk, I'm sorry. I never meant to hurt you. Asterisk. She threw the phone across the room. It hit the wall and cracked, which felt appropriate. Everything was cracking. Her heart. Her future. Her stupid, naive belief that love could conquer anything. Zainab cried for 3 hours, ate an entire tub of red bean ice cream that tasted like betrayal, then cried again because even the dessert was Korean and even dessert was rejecting her. At 2 a.m., someone knocked on her door. At 2 a.m. in Seoul, knocks meant either very good news or very terminal news. There was no in-between. Zainab opened the door without checking the peephole because honestly, at this point, if it was death coming for her, at least she wouldn't have to pay next month's rent. 2 men in black suits stood in her hallway. They looked like they ironed their facial expressions along with their clothes. Behind them stood a man she'd seen exactly twice in her life. Once at a distance during a family business dinner Min-jae had nervously excluded her from, and once in a newspaper article that very carefully avoided words like alleged or suspected. Kang Dae-hyun looked like what would happen if danger learned to wear a suit. He was 63 years old and terrifying in the way ancient things were terrifying, old enough to have seen everything, powerful enough to survive it all, and absolutely convinced of his right to decide who lived and who didn't. Min-jae's father. The man even other criminals whispered about. Seoul's most dangerous open secret. Ms. Okoye, he said, his English flawless and cold as a morgue slab. We need to discuss your situation. Zainab stared at Kang Dae-hyun standing in her doorway like death had learned to knock politely, and the first thought that went through her mind was, well, this is how I die. Murdered in my apartment that smells like desperation and red bean ice cream, wearing pajamas with holes in them, killed by my ex-boyfriend's mafia boss father because apparently this week couldn't get any worse. My situation? Zainab heard herself laugh, and it sounded unhinged even to her own ears. Is that what we're calling public humiliation now? A situation? Like a weather condition? Like, today's forecast is scattered dignity with a 90% chance of shame. Dae-hyun's expression didn't change. His face was carved from marble and bad decisions. My son is an idiot. Finally, Zainab said, something we agree on. His idiocy has created a problem. Dae-hyun stepped inside without invitation, and his 2 guards followed, filling her tiny apartment like ominous furniture. They made her cramped living space feel even smaller, like the walls were closing in. You're carrying my grandchild. My enemies know this. They will use it. Zainab's blood went cold. Your enemies know? How do your enemies know? I only told Min-jae 3 weeks ago. Information is currency in my world, Ms. Okoye. The moment my son told his mother, the moment his mother told the family, that information became a weapon. Right now, there are men in this city calculating how to use you against me. He sat down on her couch like he owned it, which, knowing his reach, he probably did own her building anyway. Worse, my son's rejection has made you vulnerable. Vulnerable people in my world become casualties or weapons. I don't permit either option. So what? Zainab said, her heart hammering. You're here to make me disappear? Because I've had a really terrible week, and honestly, eternal darkness is starting to sound appealing. I'm here to marry you. The words landed in her apartment like a grenade in a library. For a full 10 seconds, Zainab just stared at him, convinced she'd finally snapped. Stress-induced psychosis. That had to be it. She was hallucinating. This wasn't real. Korean mafia bosses didn't show up at 2 a.m. to propose marriage to pregnant black women they'd barely met. I'm sorry, what? Zainab blinked rapidly. Did the Korean mafia boss just propose to me at 2 a.m. in my apartment that smells like sad person and yesterday's ramen? Yes. That's insane. That's completely insane. That's the most insane thing I've ever heard, and I once watched a man in Hongdae try to fight a vending machine because it ate his money, so the bar for insanity is actually pretty high. That's strategy. Dae-hyun's voice was calm, measured, like they were discussing stock portfolios instead of a marriage between strangers. My son has dishonored both our families. A marriage between us restores that honor and provides you with protection. Your child will be legitimate. My enemies will think twice before targeting my wife. And Min-jae, a smile crossed his face, cold and sharp as a blade. Min-jae will learn what loss actually means. Zainab sat down hard on her second-hand chair. So this is revenge? Against your own son? This is chess, Ms. Okoye. Min-jae thought he could discard you like a losing hand. He needs to understand that in my world, every piece matters, and that the queen is more valuable than he ever will be. I'm not a chess piece. No, Dae-hyun agreed. You're not. You're a woman who stood in a penthouse surrounded by vultures and didn't break. You called them dishonorable to their faces. You walked out with your head high. He leaned forward slightly. Strength like that is rare. I value rare things. Zainab's mind was racing, spinning, trying to process information that didn't make sense. Let me get this straight. You want to marry me, a woman you've met exactly 0 times before tonight, to protect your grandchild, embarrass your son, and somehow restore family honor by doing the exact thing your family said was impossible. Yes. And what do you get out of this? Really? Dae-hyun stood, straightening his cuffs. They were expensive cuffs. Probably cost more than her entire wardrobe. I get a daughter-in-law who has a spine. I get a grandchild who will be protected under my name. I get to watch my son realize that actions have consequences. He pulled out a business card because apparently mafia bosses had business cards and placed it on her coffee table. You have 24 hours to decide whether you want to be a victim or a queen. And if I say no, then you'll leave Seoul within 48 hours with enough money to start over somewhere safe. I'll ensure you and the child are protected from a distance. But you'll always be looking over your shoulder, wondering when one of my enemies will decide you're worth the risk. He walked toward the door, his guards parting like a dark sea. Or you can marry me, become untouchable, and watch everyone who humiliated you realize they made a catastrophic mistake. He was at the threshold when Zainab found her voice again. Why not just kill Min-jae? Wouldn't that be simpler? More your style. Dae-hyun looked back at her, and for the first time, something almost human flickered in his eyes. Killing him would be mercy. Making him live with his choices? That's punishment. My son threw away something precious because he's a coward. He needs to watch that precious thing become something he can never touch, never have, never deserve. He needs to understand that his cowardice cost him everything. Then he was gone, leaving Zainab alone with a business card and the most insane decision she'd ever had to make. She didn't sleep that night. How could she? She paced her apartment, making lists of pros and cons that all sounded crazy. Pros: safety, money, protection, revenge, watching Min-jae suffer. Cons: marriage to a literal crime boss, becoming part of Seoul's underworld, sharing a life with a man who probably had bodies buried in concrete somewhere, possibly becoming a widow when a rival gang inevitably tried to kill her husband. At 7 a.m., she called her best friend Michelle in Atlanta. Michelle had been her roommate in college, the person who'd encouraged her to take that teaching job in Seoul 3 years ago, the person who'd listened to her gush about Min-jae for 2 years straight. "Girl, it's midnight here, this better be good," Michelle answered groggily. "Min-jae's family made him break up with me yesterday. Then his father showed up at my apartment at 2 a.m. and proposed marriage." Silence. Then, "I'm sorry, run that back." His father did what? Zainab explained everything. The penthouse, the humiliation, Dae-hyun's midnight visit, the impossible choice. "Okay," Michelle said slowly, "I need you to hear me very clearly. This man is dangerous. Like, actually dangerous. Not, oh, he's got a bad boy vibe dangerous. Like, people disappear dangerous. I know. But Min-jae threw me away like trash, Michelle. His whole family looked at me like I was something dirty they needed to dispose of. And now his father is offering me a chance to become the most untouchable woman in Seoul, to have power, to make them all regret treating me like I was nothing." That's your anger talking. Good. I'm angry. I'm furious. I'm so angry I can barely breathe. And yes, maybe this is crazy. Maybe this is the worst decision I'll ever make, but you know what? Staying with Min-jae would have been worse. Raising my baby alone while his family tries to erase me from existence would be worse. At least this way, I'm making a choice. I'm taking control. Michelle sighed. "If you do this, you can't come back from it. You know that, right? You marry this man, you're in that world forever." "I know. And you're okay with that?" Zainab looked at the business card on her coffee table. Kong Dae-hyun. A phone number. A choice between survival and surrender. "I'm not okay with anything right now," Zainab admitted. "But I'd rather be a protected queen in hell than a discarded victim in heaven." At 9 a.m., she called the number. Dae-hyun answered on the first ring. "Miss Okoye." "I have conditions," Zainab said, her voice steadier than she felt. "If we do this, if I agree to this insane marriage, I need guarantees." "Name them." "My baby gets citizenship. Full legal protection. Education fund. Everything. Done. I want separate bedrooms. This marriage is legal protection, not a real relationship." "Agreed. And I want Min-jae to know. I want him to watch. I want him at the wedding, sitting in the front row, watching his father marry the woman he threw away." A pause. Then something that might have been approval in Dae-hyun's voice. The dress fitting happened in a building that didn't have signs, which Zainab was learning meant it was either incredibly exclusive or incredibly illegal. Possibly both. A woman named Sunhee greeted her with a smile that didn't reach her eyes and led her through rooms that looked like museums had mated with boutiques and produced very expensive offspring. Mr. Kong has selected several options, son, he said, unveiling dresses that probably cost more than Zainab's entire college education. He wants you to choose whichever makes you feel powerful. Not beautiful.
Not happy.
Powerful. That told Zainab everything she needed to know about what this marriage actually was. She chose a dress that was white silk and armor combined, structured like a weapon, elegant like a threat. When she looked in the mirror, she didn't see a bride. She saw a declaration of war. Perfect, son, he murmured, and Zainab couldn't tell if she was afraid or impressed. Maybe both. The next 3 days blurred together in a fevered dream of preparation. Daehyun's people handled everything with military efficiency. Invitations were sent to people who probably had body counts as hobbies. The venue was a cathedral that looked like God and money had collaborated on architecture. Security was discussed in terms that made Zainab realize people might actually die at her wedding, and everyone seemed to think this was normal. Min-jae called 17 times. She answered once. Zainab, please, you can't do this, he said, and he sounded desperate.
Good.
You don't understand what you're getting into. My father is dangerous. This isn't protection, it's a prison. Funny, Zainab said coldly, coming from the man who threw me into a room full of your family and let them destroy me. Where was your concern then? Where was your protection when your mother was calling me unsuitable? When your aunt was suggesting I terminate my pregnancy and disappear? I was trying to protect you from exactly this situation. By abandoning me? By letting them treat me like garbage? That's not protection, Min-jae. That's cowardice with a pretty excuse.
She paused.
I'll see you at the wedding. Front row. Your father insisted. She hung up while he was still talking. Friday night, Daehyun requested dinner. Not demanded. Requested. They met at his house, which wasn't a house so much as a fortress disguised as luxury real estate. Guards everywhere. Cameras hidden in art. Panic rooms probably masquerading as closets. Nervous? Daehyun asked over soup that probably cost more than most people's cars. Terrified, Zainab admitted. But I wasn't going to let that stop me. Good. Fear that stops you is weakness. Fear that moves you forward is power. He set down his spoon. Tomorrow, Seoul's underworld will be watching. Rival families. Politicians. Police who pretend they don't know who I am. They'll all be calculating what this marriage means, where the power shifts who gains advantage. And what does it mean? It means Kang Daehyun married a woman his son discarded, elevating her above his own blood. It means I value strength over tradition. It means anyone who thought you were vulnerable was catastrophically wrong. His eyes met hers. It means you're my family now, and harming my family is suicide. Zainab's throat tightened. Why are you really doing this? I told you. You didn't break. There's more. I can feel it. Daehyun was quiet for a long moment. My son is weak. Weak men make terrible decisions. I built an empire on strength, on loyalty, on understanding that power protects what matters. Min-jae threw away someone valuable because other people told him to. That's not leadership. That's cowardice. He leaned back. You deserve better than a coward. My grandchild deserves better than a coward's legacy. So I'm fixing my son's mistake. By marrying his pregnant ex-girlfriend. By giving you the protection you should have had from the beginning. He smiled slightly. And yes, by ensuring Min-jae understands consequences. I've given him everything. Perhaps it's time he experienced loss. Saturday morning arrived with sunshine that felt inappropriate for what was essentially a mafia wedding. Zainab put on her armor disguised as a wedding dress and tried not to vomit from nerves or morning sickness. Probably both. The cathedral filled with Seoul's most dangerous people dressed in their most expensive clothes. Zainab walked down an aisle lined with criminals and corrupt officials, her heels clicking like gunshots on marble. And there, in the front row, sat Min-jae. He looked destroyed. Good. When Zainab reached the altar and took Daehyun's hand, she saw Min-jae's face crumble. Saw him realize exactly what he'd lost. Saw him understand that his father had just claimed everything he'd been stupid enough to throw away. The ceremony was efficient. No long speeches about love, just vows about protection, partnership, and permanence. When Dae-hyun slipped the ring on her finger, it felt less like marriage and more like coronation. "You may kiss the bride," the officiant said. Dae-hyun leaned in, whispered, "Are you ready to be queen?" and kissed her cheek with perfect propriety. The reception was tension wrapped in champagne. Politicians congratulated them nervously. Rival bosses assessed weaknesses. Min-jae stood in the corner looking like his soul had evacuated his body. Then the speeches started. The speeches were exactly what Zainab expected from a gathering where half the guests probably had diplomatic immunity and the other half had enough money to buy it. Polite. Careful. Every word weighted with implications that could start wars or end them. But then Min-jae stood up. The room went silent in that specific way that happens when everyone realizes a train wreck is about to occur and nobody can look away. Dae-hyun's hand tightened slightly on his glass, the only indication he was surprised. One of his guards shifted position, hand moving subtly toward his jacket. "I'd like to say something," Min-jae announced, his voice cracking slightly. He looked drunk, though Zainab hadn't seen him drinking. Maybe he was drunk on stupidity. That seemed to be his baseline these days. "Min-jae," his mother hissed from her table, "sit down." He ignored her. "Zainab and I were supposed to get married.
3 weeks from now.
We had plans. A future. A baby." His eyes found hers across the room, desperate and pathetic. "You can't actually want this. You can't actually want to marry my father. This is insane. This is revenge." Dae-hyun didn't move, but the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Several guests looked genuinely concerned, like they were witnessing a man commit suicide in slow motion. Zainab stood up slowly, her dress catching light like a threat. She could have stayed silent, could have let Dae-hyun handle this. But something hot and furious was burning in her chest, and she was done being the quiet victim. "You're right," she said clearly, her voice carrying across the cathedral reception hall. "This is revenge. Absolutely. But not the way you think." Min-jae blinked, confused. "See, I'm not marrying your father to hurt you, Min-jae. I'm marrying him because he offered me something you never did. Respect. Protection. The promise that I matter." She took a step forward, and several people leaned in to hear better. "You had 2 years to stand up for me. 2 years to tell your family that I was worth fighting for. Instead, you let them destroy me in a penthouse suite while you studied your shoes like they contain the secrets of the universe." Someone in the back coughed to cover a laugh. "You want to talk about insane? You want to talk about revenge?" Zainab's smile was sharp enough to draw blood. "What's insane is thinking you could throw me away and I'd just disappear quietly. What's insane is believing your cowardice wouldn't have consequences. Your father understood something you never did. I'm not a problem to be managed. I'm a person who deserved loyalty." Min-jae's face was red now, humiliation and anger mixing into something ugly. "He doesn't love you. He's using you to punish me. And you loved me?" Zainab laughed, and it echoed in the vaulted ceiling. "You loved me so much you were planning a marriage alliance with the Young family before you even broke up with me. You loved me so much you let your family call me unsuitable. You loved me so much you suggested I get rid of our baby and leave the country." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Apparently, that information hadn't made the gossip rounds yet. "So yes, Min-jae, this is revenge. But it's also survival. It's also me choosing power over pity. And, honestly," she looked at Dae-hyun, who was watching her with something that might have been pride, "I'd rather be respected by a dangerous man than abandoned by a coward." The silence that followed was deafening. Then Dae-hyun stood, placed his hand on the small of Zainab's back with careful propriety, and addressed the room. "My son is distraught. Understandably. He had something valuable and lost it through his own weakness. But this is a celebration, not a therapy session. Min-jae, sit down or leave. Choose quickly." It wasn't a suggestion. It was a command from a man who ended arguments with permanence. Min-jae looked around the room, realized nobody was coming to his defense, and stumbled toward the exit. His mother followed, throwing Zainab a look of pure hatred. Good. Zainab was collecting those looks like trophies now. After they left, the party resumed with the uncomfortable energy of people pretending they hadn't just witnessed a family implosion. Music played. Champagne flowed. People laughed too loudly at jokes that weren't funny. Zainab found herself on the balcony an hour later, breathing in Seoul's night air and trying to process what her life had become in 72 hours. Rejected. Proposed to by a crime boss.
Married.
Publicly vindicated. It was exhausting. You handled that well, Dae-hyun said, appearing beside her with 2 glasses of something expensive. He handed her one, but she shook her head. Pregnant, remember? Sparkling water. I'm not trying to poison my grandchild. He sipped his own drink. You surprised me tonight. I thought you might let me handle Min-jae. I'm tired of other people handling my life. Good. You'll need that fire. He looked out over the city, Seoul spread beneath them like scattered diamonds. Tomorrow, the real work begins. People will test you. They'll try to find weaknesses. They'll want to see if you're truly under my protection or just a trophy I'll discard when convenient. And what am I? Really? Dae-hyun turned to face her fully. You're my daughter-in-law. My family. The mother of my grandchild. In my world, that makes you untouchable. But you need to believe it yourself. Weakness invites attack. Confidence prevents it. I don't feel confident. I feel terrified and slightly nauseous, though that might be pregnancy. Fear and power aren't opposites, Zainab. They're partners. The trick is making sure everyone else only sees the power. He set down his glass. We should go. Long day tomorrow. I'm introducing you to my business partners. They need to understand that disrespecting you is the same as disrespecting me. As they walked back inside, Zainab caught her reflection in the window. She looked different. Harder. Like rejection had burned away something soft and left behind steel. Maybe that wasn't such a bad thing. The business meeting happened in a restaurant that definitely served food, but primarily served as neutral territory for men who solved disagreements with violence. Zainab wore black because Dae-hyun's stylist had explained that in Seoul's underworld, black meant you weren't playing games. Black meant business. Black meant don't test me. 6 men sat around a table that probably cost more than most people's cars. They all looked at Zainab like she was a fascinating insect they were deciding whether to study or squash. Dae-hyun sat at the head, utterly relaxed, which somehow made him more terrifying. Gentlemen, Dae-hyun said in Korean, which Zainab understood perfectly, though everyone assumed she didn't. My wife, Zainab. She'll be attending our meetings from now on. A man with silver hair and expensive watch raised an eyebrow. With respect, Dae-hyun, our business is sensitive. Is it wise to involve outsiders? She's not an outsider.
She's family.
And anyone who considers my family an outsider can leave now. Dae-hyun's voice was pleasant. His eyes were not. Nobody moved. The meeting proceeded with discussions about territories, payments, shipments of things nobody named specifically. Zainab sat quietly, absorbing information, understanding that knowledge was currency here. Power came from knowing secrets. Halfway through, a younger man, maybe 40, leaned forward with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Mrs. Kong, you must find our conversations boring. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable waiting outside. Every man at the table tensed. They knew what Zainab was only beginning to understand.
This was a test.
Challenge the wife, gauge the husband's reaction, find the weakness. Zainab smiled back. Actually, Mr. Park, I find it fascinating. Especially the part where you're skimming 15% off the Southern District collections. Very creative accounting. The room went silent. Park's face drained of color. I'm pregnant, not stupid, Zainab continued calmly. I've been reviewing the books Dae-hyun gave me. Your numbers don't match the reports from 3 other sources. So either you're skimming or you're phenomenally bad at math. Either way, it's a problem. Dae-hyun didn't smile, but something flickered in his eyes. Approval, maybe. Possibly amusement at watching Park realize he'd catastrophically miscalculated. I can explain, Park stammered. You can return the money, Dae-hyun said quietly. By Friday. with interest. And you can apologize to my wife for suggesting she's decorative rather than functional. Park's apology came out strangled, but it came. After the meeting, in the car heading back to the fortress Zainab now called home, Dae-hyun finally spoke. How long have you been reviewing the books? Since yesterday.
Couldn't sleep.
Pregnancy, insomnia. Figured I might as well be useful. She looked at him. You knew about Park, didn't you? You were waiting to see if I'd catch it. I was waiting to see if you'd say something if you did. Many people notice problems. Few have the courage to speak. He almost smiled. You're going to be very dangerous, Zainab. Good. I'm tired of being vulnerable. The days blurred into a strange new routine. Mornings, Zainab attended meetings with Dae-hyun's network, learning names, faces, weaknesses. Afternoons, she studied Korean business law, criminal enterprise patterns, how to spot lies in financial documents. Evenings, she had dinner with Dae-hyun, where they discussed strategy, like chess partners rather than married strangers. They never touched beyond professional courtesy. Separate bedrooms. Separate lives that intersected only for business and appearances. It should have felt cold. Instead, it felt safe. Predictable. Nobody was pretending this was love.
It was partnership.
Transaction. Mutual benefit. Then Min-jae showed up at the house. Zainab was in the garden, enjoying rare sunshine and trying not to vomit from morning sickness, when she heard shouting. She walked around the corner to find Min-jae arguing with two guards who looked ready to make him disappear permanently. I need to see her, Min-jae was saying desperately.
Please.
5 minutes. That's all. Let him in, Zainab called out, and the guards looked uncertain. It's fine. I can handle him. They stepped back reluctantly, hands still near their weapons. Min-jae rushed forward, stopping just short of touching her. He looked terrible. Dark circles under his eyes. Wrinkled clothes. The dissolution of a man who'd realized too late what he'd lost. Zainab, please. We need to talk. Really talk. We have nothing to discuss, Min-jae. Yes, we do. That's my baby. My child. You can't just cut me out completely. His eyes were desperate, pleading. I made a mistake. A huge mistake. But I'm trying to fix it. I called off the Young family arrangement. I told my mother I don't care about her approval anymore. I want us back. I want our family. Zainab stared at him. This man she'd loved for 2 years and felt nothing. Not anger anymore. Not hurt. Just emptiness where feelings used to live. You want to know something funny? She said quietly. 2 weeks ago, if you'd said those words, I would have forgiven you. I would have taken you back. I would have believed you'd changed. She touched her stomach lightly. But you didn't change because you realized you were wrong. You changed because you lost. Because your father took something from you, and now you want it back. I'm not a possession, Min-jae. I'm not a prize in your family's power games. That's not fair. Nothing about this is fair. You threw me away when I was inconvenient. Now I'm protected, powerful, and suddenly you remember I exist?
No.
You don't get to do that. She stepped back. The baby will know you if they choose to, when they're old enough to make that decision. But you and me, we're done. We were done the moment you sat in that penthouse and let your family destroy me. He doesn't love you, Min-jae said desperately. My father doesn't love you. He's using you. I know. And I'm using him right back. That's called a partnership, Min-jae. Something you never understood. She turned toward the house.
Leave.
Don't come back. And stop calling. It's pathetic. She walked away while he was still talking, feeling lighter somehow. Like she'd set down something heavy she'd been carrying too long. 3 months into the marriage, Zainab's belly started showing properly, and Seoul's underworld couldn't stop talking about it. Every meeting she attended, every restaurant she walked into, people stared. Some with curiosity, some with calculation. All of them trying to figure out if the pregnancy made her weaker or more dangerous. Dae-hyun's answer was to buy her a security detail that followed her everywhere like well-dressed shadows. A woman named Jisoo led the team, former special forces, could probably kill someone with a chopstick, spoke 4 languages, and looked like a fashion model. Zainab liked her immediately. Mrs. Kong, Jisoo said during their first meeting, my job is to keep you alive. That means you do what I say when I say it, no arguments. Understood. What if I think you're wrong? Jisoo almost smiled. Then you're probably about to die, so you should listen anyway. They got along great. The real test came on a Wednesday afternoon at a charity gala that was actually a networking event for Seoul's elite criminals to pretend they were legitimate businessmen. Zainab wore emerald green and diamonds that Dae-hyun had presented her with like armor before battle. These belong to my mother, he'd said simply. She was the only person my father feared. Wear them. Let people remember that powerful women run in this family. The gala was held at a museum because nothing said reformed criminal like appreciating art you probably stole at some point. Zainab navigated conversations with prosecutors who pretended not to know Dae-hyun was a crime boss, politicians who owed him favors, and businessmen whose companies were definitely fronts for money laundering. Then she met the Jung family. Mrs. Jung approached with a smile that could cut glass, her daughter Mi-sun trailing behind like a beautiful, empty-eyed accessory. This was the family Min-jae had tried to align with. The daughter he'd planned to marry after disposing of Zainab. Mrs. Kong, Mrs. Jung said, her English deliberately patronizing. How unexpected to see you here. I thought these events might be too complicated for someone so new to our world. Translation: you're an outsider who doesn't belong. Zainab smiled back. Mrs. Jung, how lovely to finally meet the family that tried to purchase my ex-fiancé like discount furniture. Tell me, did you get a refund when the deal fell through, or are you still hoping he'll go on clearance? Several nearby conversations stopped. Jisoo shifted position slightly, ready for violence. Mrs. Jung's smile froze. I'm sure I don't know what you mean. Of course you don't. Just like I'm sure you don't know that your husband's shipping company has been flagged by customs 17 times in the past 6 months. Or that your son's gambling debts are the reason you were so desperate to align with the Kong family in the first place. Zainab took a sip of her sparkling water. I may be new to this world, Mrs. Jung, but I'm a very fast learner, and I have access to much better accountants than you do. The color drained from Mrs. Jung's face. Mi-sun looked confused, probably because nobody had explained to her that she was being sold to cover her brother's casino mistakes. How dare you? Mrs. Jung hissed. How dare I what? Tell the truth? Do basic research? Protect my family's interests? Zainab leaned in slightly. Here's something else I learned. In this world, respect isn't given. It's taken. You try to take something from me, my fiancé, my future, my dignity. But I took something much bigger. I took your entire alliance. I took your access to the Kong family's protection. I took your daughter's ticket to security. She straightened up, every inch the Queen Dae-hyun had told her to become. So, here's how this works now. You speak to me with respect, or you don't speak to me at all. You acknowledge that I'm Dae-hyun's wife, which makes me more powerful than you'll ever be. And you stop looking at me like I'm something you scraped off your shoe, because we both know whose shoes are worth more. Mrs. Jung opened her mouth, closed it, and walked away with as much dignity as she could salvage. Mi-sun followed, glancing back once with something that might have been admiration or fear. Jisoo appeared at Zainab's elbow. That was either brilliant or suicidal. Possibly both. Did I go too far? Mr. Kong is watching from across the room.
He's smiling.
Not the scary smile. The proud one. Jisoo nodded slightly. You did fine. Later that night, back at the house, Dae-hyun poured himself whiskey and actually laughed. Mrs. Jung called me 3 times, demanding I control my wife. I told her I didn't control you any more than I control the weather, and you were equally capable of destruction if provoked. Are you angry? Zainab asked, suddenly uncertain. Angry? You just destroyed the Jung family's social standing in under 5 minutes using nothing but research and a sharp tongue. I'm impressed. He raised his glass. To my wife, who fights battles I didn't know needed fighting. They clinked glasses, his whiskey, her sparkling water, and Zainab felt something shift. This wasn't just a transaction anymore.
This was partnership.
Real partnership. I have something to tell you. Dae-hyun said after a moment, his expression growing serious. Min Jae has been making moves, talking to my rivals, suggesting that your marriage to me is a weakness, that I've grown soft, distracted by protecting a pregnant woman. Zainab's blood went cold. Is he trying to start a war? He's trying to prove himself, to show he's strong enough to challenge me, to take back control. Dae-hyun set down his glass. He's an idiot. But he's a dangerous idiot with my blood and access to people who might believe his lies. What do? We remind everyone why challenging the Kong family is suicide. He looked at her steadily. Are you ready to see how this world really works? Not the business meetings and the charity galas. The real work. The dark work. Zainab thought about Min Jae, scheming somewhere, trying to destroy what she'd built. Thought about the baby growing inside her, the life she was trying to protect. Thought about being called weak, vulnerable, a liability. Show me, she said. Show me everything. Dae-hyun smiled, and this time it was the scary smile. The one that reminded Zainab exactly who she'd married. Tomorrow night, he said. Wear black. And leave your mercy at home. Now here's where I need you to stop and think. And be honest, asterisk, have you ever watched someone underestimate another person just because of how they look or where they're from? Ever seen someone get written off, only to prove everyone catastrophically wrong? Drop a comment about a time you witnessed someone being underestimated and then absolutely demolishing expectations. And if you think the Jung family got what they deserved, hit that like button. Only people who side with bullies and manipulators won't engage. Don't be that person. Let's build a community that celebrates people standing up for themselves. Now back to the story, because tomorrow night, Zainab's about to learn exactly what kind of empire she married into. Tomorrow night turned out to be a warehouse in a part of Seoul that didn't exist on tourist maps. The kind of place where concrete absorbed screams and questions died before reaching the street. Zainab sat in the back of a bulletproof Mercedes, her heart hammering, watching Jisoo check weapons with the casual efficiency of someone reviewing a grocery list. You don't have to come inside, Dae-hyun said quietly. You can wait in the car. No one would think less of you. I would think less of me, Zainab replied. You said people think I'm your weakness. I need to show them I'm not. The warehouse interior was exactly what she'd expected from every crime movie she'd ever seen. Dim lighting, metal chairs, a man tied to one of them looking absolutely terrified. He was young, maybe 30, and his face was already bruised. Two of Dae-hyun's men stood nearby, silent as gravestones. This is Kim Jae-sung, Dae-hyun said calmly, as if introducing her to a colleague at a business conference. He worked for my Southern District operations. Last week, he sold information about my shipping routes to a rival family. Information that led to a shipment being intercepted. 3 of my men were arrested. 15 million won lost. Jae-sung was crying now, blubbering apologies in Korean that tumbled over themselves. Please, Mr. Kong. I was desperate. My sister needs surgery. They offered so much money, I didn't think. You didn't think I would find out? Dae-hyun's voice was still calm, which somehow made it more terrifying. Or, you didn't think consequences applied to you? He turned to Zainab. In my world, betrayal has one punishment.
Death.
It's simple. It's clear. It prevents others from making the same mistake.
He paused.
But you're here now. My wife. The mother of my grandchild. So I'm offering something I've never offered before. A choice. Zainab's mouth went dry. What kind of choice? This man betrayed me for money to save his sister. The sister exists, I checked. She does need surgery. His story is true. Dae-hyun looked at Jae-sung with no emotion whatsoever. So, you decide. Does he die for his betrayal? Or does he live, and we pay for his sister's surgery, and he works for free for the next 5 years to repay his debt? The warehouse went silent. Everyone stared at Zainab, Dae-hyun's men, Jisoo, Jae-sung with desperate hope in his eyes. This was a test. Maybe the biggest test. Show mercy and seem weak. Show cruelty and become the monster everyone expected. Zainab walked closer to Jae-sung, her heels clicking on concrete. She studied his face, the fear, the regret, the desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, he'd survive this. You sold out 3 men to save 1 woman, she said quietly in Korean, and Jae-sung's eyes widened in surprise that she spoke his language fluently. 3 men who have families too, who have children, who trusted you. You decided your sister's life was worth more than their freedom. I'm sorry, Jae-sung sobbed. I'm so sorry. I was wrong. Please. You were wrong, Zainab agreed. But you were also desperate. And desperation makes people do terrible things. She looked at Dae-hyun. I'm not deciding whether he lives or dies. That's not my place. I'm deciding whether we're the kind of people who understand why someone makes a terrible choice, even when we punish them for it. She turned back to Jae-sung. You'll live. Your sister gets her surgery. But you work for this family for 7 years, not 5.
Free.
And if you ever betray us again, there won't be a conversation. There won't be mercy. There will just be a hole in the ground with your name on it. Do you understand? Jae-sung nodded frantically, crying harder now with relief. And the 3 men who were arrested because of you? Zainab continued. You visit their families, monthly. You help them while their husbands and fathers are in prison. You make their lives easier. You remember what your choices cost other people. You live with that weight. That's your real punishment. Dae-hyun gestured, and his men cut Jae-sung loose. The man collapsed, still crying, and bowed so low his forehead touched the dirty concrete. Thank you. Thank you. I won't forget this. I swear on my sister's life. See that you don't, Dae-hyun said coldly. Because Mrs. Kang's mercy is a one-time offer. There won't be a second chance. Outside, in the car heading home, Dae-hyun was quiet for a long time. Zainab couldn't read his expression, couldn't tell if she'd passed his test or failed spectacularly. You're wondering if I'm angry, he finally said. Are you?
No.
I'm realizing something. He looked at her directly. I built this empire on fear. On absolute consequences. On making sure everyone knew that crossing me meant death. It worked. It kept me in power for 30 years. He paused. But you just created something more dangerous than fear. You created loyalty. That man won't betray us again, not because he's afraid, but because you gave him something no one in this world ever gives. A second chance. He'll remember that forever. So, I did the right thing? You did something better than right. You did something unexpected. A slight smile. Min Jae is still trying to convince people you're my weakness. After tonight, word will spread that my wife showed mercy to a traitor and somehow made that mercy more terrifying than violence. You're not making me look weak, Zainab. You're making me look like I married a genius. 2 weeks later, Min Jae made his move. He'd gathered support from 3 smaller families, convinced them that Dae-hyun was vulnerable, distracted by his pregnant foreign wife. They hit one of the Kong family's nightclubs on a Friday night, no one killed, but the message was clear. A challenge. A declaration of war. The family meeting that followed was held in Dae-hyun's home office, a room that looked like a library but felt like a war room. 10 of his top men gathered, along with Zainab, discussing response strategies with the efficiency of generals planning a campaign. We hit them back twice as hard, one man suggested. Show them that challenging us is suicide. We cut off their supply lines, another offered. Strangle them economically. Dae-hyun listened to all of them, then turned to Zainab. What do you think? Every man in the room looked surprised. Some looked offended. Asking the pregnant foreign wife for strategic advice apparently wasn't protocol. I think violence makes Min Jae look like a victim, Zainab said carefully. He's trying to frame this as a son reclaiming his inheritance from a father who betrayed him. If you destroy him with force, some people might sympathize. Might think he had a point. So, what do you suggest? Humiliation. Public, complete humiliation. She pulled out her phone, showed them surveillance photos Jisoo had obtained. Min Jae's been living beyond his means. Borrowing money from loan sharks. Gambling. Making promises to these families about territory and profits he can't deliver. He's desperate and sloppy. She looked around the room. So we expose him. Every debt, every lie, every failed promise. We let everyone see that he's not a legitimate challenger to your power. He's a spoiled child throwing a tantrum. We make him look so pathetic that the families supporting him abandon him out of embarrassment. Silence. Then one of the older men chuckled. That's cruel. That's strategic, Zainab corrected. Violence makes martyrs. Humiliation makes cautionary tales. Dae-hyun smiled. The scary smile.
Do it.
All of it. I want Min-jae's failures documented and distributed by tomorrow morning. Every debt collector, every casino, every broken promise. Let Seoul see exactly what my son has become. The campaign was systematic and brutal. By Monday, every major player in Seoul's underworld had received detailed reports of Min-jae's incompetence. His debts, public knowledge. His gambling problems, documented with casino footage. His promises to the families backing him, exposed as lies he had no power to fulfill. The families abandoned him within 48 hours. Min-jae showed up at the house 3 days later, looking like death. Zainab was in the garden again, her favorite spot, where the baby seemed to kick less violently when he appeared. No guard stopped him this time. Dae-hyun had given explicit instructions to let him through. You destroyed me, Min-jae said. No preamble. No greeting. Just accusation. My father, fine. I expected that.
But you?
You're the one who suggested it, aren't you? The humiliation campaign. That was your idea. Yes, Zainab said simply.
Why?
What did I ever do to you that deserved this? She stared at him, this man she'd once loved, and laughed. Actually laughed. What did you do? Min-jae, you threw me away. You let your family destroy me. You planned to marry someone else while I was pregnant with your child. You tried to start a war against your own father using me as justification. And you're asking what you did. I apologized. I tried to make it right. You tried to take back what you lost. That's not the same thing. She stood up, her hand on her belly. You know what the difference is between you and your father? When Dae-hyun makes a choice, he lives with the consequences. He doesn't apologize. He doesn't make excuses. He owns his decisions. You make terrible choices and then cry when people hold you accountable. He's a monster. Maybe, but he's a monster who kept his promises to me, who gave me protection when you gave me nothing, who treats me with more respect than you ever did. She stepped closer. You want to know the really funny part? I didn't marry your father to hurt you, but watching you suffer has been the best unintended consequence of my entire life. Min-jae looked at her like he'd never seen her before. You've changed.
No.
I just stopped pretending to be small so you could feel big. She turned toward the house. Leave, Min-jae. And don't come back. There's nothing for you here anymore. She walked away, and this time, she didn't look back. 6 months later, Zainab gave birth to a daughter. She had Zainab's dark skin, Dae-hyun's sharp eyes, and a cry that could probably command armies someday. They named her Amara, meaning grace in Igbo and immortal in Korean. A bridge between worlds. A promise of something new. Dae-hyun held his granddaughter with surprising gentleness, this man whose hands had signed death warrants, and something shifted in his expression. Something soft. Something human. She's perfect, he said quietly. She's ours, Zainab corrected. Our family. Our future. In the hospital room, surrounded by guards and flowers and the strange safety she'd built from rejection and revenge, Zainab realized something profound. Min-jae's betrayal hadn't destroyed her. It had freed her, had forced her to become stronger, sharper, more powerful than she'd ever imagined possible. She'd come to Seoul as a teacher with dreams of love and forever. She was leaving the hospital as a queen with a daughter and an empire. Sometimes the best revenge isn't moving on. It's moving up. And as Zainab looked at Amara, at Dae-hyun, at the life she'd built from the ashes of her worst day, she understood that she hadn't just survived rejection. She'd conquered it. Min-jae sent flowers to the hospital. Zainab had them donated to the children's ward. He sent a card requesting to meet his daughter. Zainab burned it. Some bridges, once burned, should stay ash. 3 years later, Zainab ran half of Daehyun's legitimate business operations. 5 years later, she'd transformed the family's reputation, building schools and hospitals that cleaned money while actually helping people. 7 years later, when Daehyun finally retired, he handed her control of the empire with complete confidence. Min-jae watched all of this from a distance, working a mid-level job at a company that pitted him, living in an apartment that embarrassed him, forever known as the man who threw away a queen and got a lifetime of regret in return. And Amara? She grew up knowing her mother was the most powerful woman in Seoul. Grew up watching Zainab command rooms full of dangerous men with nothing but intelligence and will. Grew up understanding that sometimes the best revenge is building something so magnificent that everyone who doubted you spends the rest of their lives wondering what they missed. On Amara's 8th birthday, Daehyun pulled Zainab aside at the party. "I have a confession," he said. "Oh, that night I proposed to you. I told you it was about strategy, about protecting my grandchild, about punishing Min-jae." He smiled. That was true, but it wasn't the whole truth. What was the whole truth? "I saw you stand in that penthouse surrounded by vultures, and I saw someone who refused to break. Someone who had more spine than my entire family combined."
He paused.
"I saw someone worthy of building an empire with, and I was right." Zainab looked across the garden at Amara, laughing with her friends, surrounded by guards disguised as party staff, living a life of safety and power that rejection had somehow made possible. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for seeing me when everyone else was looking away." "Thank you," Daehyun replied, "for teaching an old monster that mercy can be more powerful than fear. For showing me that family isn't just blood, it's who stands with you when the world says you're not enough." They stood together, watching the party, this unlikely partnership that had become something real, something lasting. And somewhere in Seoul, Min-jae sat alone in his apartment, scrolling through photos of the party he wasn't invited to, finally understanding what he'd lost. Everything. He'd lost everything. And Zainab? She'd won.